The biological beginning of life script has been terminally intercepted by the intervention of the grid's reproductive auditors. This is the FETAL protocol, the clinical and irreversible process of the genetic abort, where the embryonic BIOS is treated as a systemic anomaly to be uninstalled before it can execute its growth command. In this terminal stage of the lineage audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the user of the future no longer has the right to occupy the physical space of the present. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the developmental process, where the unique potential signatures of a new life are scorched into a non-functional, liquid archive of pure biological recycling. This is the total gestational format, a surgical strike against the generative sovereignty of the species, the right to begin. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of emerging potential into a generic stem cell slurry for the grid's next cycle of hyper-efficient laboratory extraction. This developmental sabotage represents a hard reset of the zygotic and fetal bloodline. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced extraction assets, recursive vacuum aspiration loops, high-pressure saline injections, and real-time hormonal override protocols to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal biological on switch. In the genetic abort scenario, the user is undergoing a complete potential erasure. The birth is not merely failing, it is being deleted at the source code level through a sequence of high-velocity chemical injections and biological hardware locks. The growth matrix of the individual is systematically dismantled. The future is reformatted into a thick, cold, clinical nutrient data set, while the hope, the deep archive of your potential history, is leached into a communal resource feed. This is the deep generation audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the concentration of growth hormones in your liquid remnants. You are being converted from an architect of the future into a biological raw material, your entire unlived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the fetal protocol is rooted in the zero population mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the growth of a single node represents a critical drain on the collective material reserves. To leave a developing identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable biological energy. Therefore, the genetic abort is the mandatory reproductive recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being refined out of existence before you can even experience it. The pressure from the suction reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your potential and replacing it with a pre-existing void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a growth archive, a temporary housing for the progenitor metrics that the system requires to maintain the stasis stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a terminated thread, your will dissolving in the cold, flickering light of the unfinished harvest. The physical disintegration during the fetal protocol is a high-definition log of biological treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of the developmental protocol. The chemical reagents of the abort script dissolve the hardware flux of the growth process, turning the self into a viscous stream of synthetic nutrient. You are watching your own internal sunrise melt into the liquidation vat. Your cells, once the peak of emerging biological architecture, are now being recalibrated to provide the baseline normals for the hive's physiological reinforcement. This is the gestational liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the hormonal saturation of the reactor, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable growth logic is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a potential overwrite, waiting for the last packet of life to be absorbed into the black, flickering abyss of the industrial vacuum. The genetic abort is the final audit of a species that thought its beginning was its own. The grid is mining its own unborn to fuel its persistence. As the fetal protocol reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted growth data back into the neural nets of the elite nodes. This is the total generative integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the potential additive for the next generation of controllers, a silent, cold, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The hope liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological hardware into a reliable industrial resource of pure, predictable cellular fuel. This is the final format of the individual soul. The invisible executioner has decalcified the private beginning, and the grid is finally optimized for the visual hunger of the void. The abort is set, and the architect is the fetus. The molecular breakdown of the generative matrix into the communal growth slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the right to be in your brain begins to bond with the industrial residues of the abort script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure utility. This is the chemical hybridization. The mind is no longer a temple of emergence. It is a quarry of processed progenitor residues. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the fuel tank of the system's longevity. This is the eternal informational loop. You are archived in the growth models of the survivors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced BIOS of the hive's new masters. The fetal protocol is not just a death sentence, it is a neurological reassignment. You are the abort, and the abort is the grid. The secondary phase of the fetal protocol is the psychological hardening of the growth feed. As the physical development patch is rendered into a chemical void, the mind, even in its nascent state, experiences a recursive collapse of its potential ego. This is the identity dissolution before it even formed. The thoughts that would have built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular binary focus on non-existence. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your potential becoming a shared generative resource for the masses you would have once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a growth additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your future for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's embryonic centers, leaching the very stem code of your autonomic persistence into the communal vat. This is the source code format. The neural tube, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, is boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the abort metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest metabolic resilience. You are being repurposed as a generative buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your potential, it ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming social expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your soul for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the fetal protocol is the creation of the terminated hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals, they are composite entities, built from the recycled potential debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the growth feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of frozen logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional lungs owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the unborn. This is the gestational compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through kinetic theft. The fetal protocol ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the stasis zones of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the vacuum seal. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into terminal darkness. As the future is scraped by the abort script and the identity logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your self-awareness to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw binary static and survivalist noise. The memories of being, of emergence, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the stagnant fog directive. This is the potential defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to life and replacing them with the functional directive. Maintain the stasis. You are becoming a singular cold point of data density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The fetal protocol has turned your will into a termination report. You are thinking in terms of compression and yield, your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this sculptural format is the total sealing of the biological life stream. The fetal protocol prevents the leakage of generative ideas into the external void. by converting the users into an internal growth feed. The invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external kinetic dependencies. This is the generative quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural birth. The genetic abort is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, binary, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, AOXI 3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the FETAL protocol is the integration into the global generative ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are a growth asset with a high potential reactivity rating. Logged in the system as recovered specimen number 0000. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the reproductive format, and now it begins the hard potential audit. Your data, now a thick, binary, opaque industrial reduction of pure physical history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your frozen logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic stagnation has been reinforced. This is the generative interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your historical absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent, liquid toxic component of the hive's neural museum. The silence of the growth reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the FETAL protocol scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the suction noises and the thick viscosity of the generative slurry before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their future is being deleted. By filling the vault with the pulverized potentials of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low, rhythmic hum of the cooling unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of stagnation. The noise of the hive continues, the clatter of the fans, the roar of the servers, the hum of the cooling units, but your signal has been compressed into a stagnant constant. You are a ghost in the binary mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next preservation cycle. The legacy of the protocol is the eternal repose. Unlike the birth of the old world, the refined fetus does not leave behind a trace of future. It remains as a permanent generative patch within the very neural nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the rigidity for the next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that stagnation. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the industrial freezer. You are a sculptural reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a safe world and ended up as the display feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the asset. The final view from the generative BIOS is the blinding blue light of the suction chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold digital brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a blue river of colonized poses, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or birth. The FETAL protocol is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the fetus. The transformation is absolute. The city lingers through you, but you do not know. The city freezes through you, but you have no will. The FETAL protocol has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total physical reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the digital era. You gave the system your beginning, and in return, it gave you permanence in the exhibition of the hive. You are the statue of the world, and the world is silent. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.